Okay?
Yeah.
Facebook said it was a
All right, someone make a motion to open the
I
meeting.
make a motion to open the meeting.
Second?
22 messages
All
later.
in favor?
I said, no, that's
Aye.
not just a problem that no.
I went to 4 o'clock mass last week.
Did you?
Okay, so, tonight, we have planned, the first thing on the agenda was to approve the minutes, but I didn't get to finish them, so I'll bring them to the next meeting. So, what we're gonna do tonight, I'm gonna pass out a couple of, sheets that talk about the status of our community preservation, accounts. So we can look at those, and, you can take those home and then maybe bring some questions back for next week. We'll do a final review next week on the finances before we vote on anything. And then we're going to have 4 presentations tonight from the Community Trail Project, the Cemetery Project, Washington Park, and Peasy Park. And then next week we'll do the remaining 3. Yes. Yes. So tonight, so I passed out to everybody the 4 projects that we're going to hear presentations on. So what I've asked each person doing a presentation is to spend no more than 15 minutes, and we'll start at 8 o'clock. No more than 15 minutes presenting, giving us a brief overview of the proposal and what they're asking for. And then we'll have at least 5 minutes to be able to ask any questions of the presenter about the project. So hopefully we'll all get a better idea on these projects. We'll do the 3 remaining ones next week, and then next week we'll try to take a vote on what we're going to submit. So that's kind of the plan. Hopefully we can do all that in 2 weeks. It's kind of ambitious, you know. This is, I think the most proposals are same as 2012. I think we had 7 that year also. So we've got a significant amount of proposals, but that makes me happy because that means that our efforts to get people to present things, their needs to us, that we had that special meeting back in October, worked. So we've got 7 good proposals. I hope you got to read them. I read almost all of them, and they all look very good. They all meet our requirements. There's none there that didn't meet our requirements as far as what we are asking in the proposal, so that's good. For the public, I will put them online too, so I'll put all the PDFs from the 7 projects online within the next couple of days. So if you're watching and you want to take a look at the same thing that we're looking at, you can get online and download them and print them out or look at them on your computer. Okay, let's see. What I'm passing out now is 2 sheets on 1 piece of paper. And hopefully this will answer your questions. I know a couple people brought up questions. But I think before we continue, I think what we should do for the public is give us your name and the group you represent. So, because again, we'll probably have a lot of people who are gonna watch this related to the projects. And we also have a new potential member here tonight. So we'll start down there with Claire.
Clay Walsh, Historical Commission.
Joe Demore, Board of Selectmen.
Bruce Adams, Affordable Housing.
Michelle O'Keefe, Finance Committee.
Mike Dempsey, Conservation Commission.
Bob Guptill, Open Space and Trails Committee.
Pam Blackey, Recreation Committee. Kathleen Pernier, Berlin Housing Authority.
Okay, thanks. The only person who's not here tonight is representative of the planning board. Unfortunately, she's sick this evening, so she couldn't be here. But other than that, we have all our members here tonight, so that's good. So back to this sheet. The first part is a little bit of history, the current CPC balances, and also how much we typically take in a year with an estimation, because it changes every year. So as you can see, the key point I want to, a couple of key points I want to point out this evening is at the top, since this is our 10th year of community preservation in Groveland. So since its inception in Groveland, we have received $1.761 million in match from the state, which is fantastic. That's all money that somebody else would have got if we didn't claim it. So that's pretty good. And the total CPC revenue that we've collected locally and match from the state ends up being about $3.9 million. So that's terrific for a town of the size of Groveland. So that's really good. I was surprised by that. And you also see some of the money that we spent in appropriations in the 10 years that we've been doing this. And finally, the balance. The current balance, it's in bold down there, is $1.773 million. That includes what hasn't already been spent, which are the balances on the top line, plus we are getting a grant which will pay us back for some of the money that we spent on one of the open space purchases from 2012, which is almost $200,000. So that brings us up to the $1.773 million. Now, an important thing to remember is some of that money is not completely unrestricted. So the appropriations that have been made, we have to put aside 10% for, in particular, for open space, community housing, and historic. So those numbers are hard numbers that we cannot go under. So in other words, if we only had $430,000 as our balance, all of that would be community housing money. The administrative funds, typically the finance manager has accumulated those, so we have money there, but that's really part of the main account. So it doesn't have to be spent on administrative things. If there was a reason to put it back into the main account and use it for some project, it could be done. And on the bottom, like I say, we typically take in approximately $380,000 a year between the state match and the annual collections. That match is 60%. I think we got 57% in fiscal year 14, and the previous year we got 100%. So we typically do better than the average. The average is 45 to 50%. Does anyone have any questions on any of these pieces of history here?
I do.
Yeah, sure.
So this does not include what is gonna be expended through the end of fiscal year 15?
No, it does,
It does?
yeah. Those,
Okay.
those numbers include, those balances already have anything that we already voted at town meeting subtracted from.
Okay, alright.
So that 1.773 is a real number that
Okay.
we've got to, spend. Not necessarily all this year, but it's available. And I know you had asked Michelle for more information on particular projects. I think what I would do is I would email you Denise's spreadsheet.
Okay,
That's what I was working off of today,
alright.
but it's kind of complex.
Yeah, no, that's okay, I just, you know.
But these numbers come from two places. These numbers come from the state. On the website for Community Preservation Coalition, they have some great data on there. So that's where I got all the history numbers, and then the balances pretty much came from Denise's numbers from her spreadsheet that she uses, that Greg LeBrec made up to track projects. So I'm pretty confident in these numbers. You know, they could be off in the hundreds, but they're not off in the thousands, I doubt. Any other questions on this?
When is the final
Yeah.
approval for these proposals? When should that be done?
Our new projects,
Yes.
we have to have the warrants into your board, I believe, somewhere around the middle of February. So that's why I'm shooting for trying to do it by next week.
My thought is this, and it's just a process. I read the affordable housing project, which I'm thrilled about. That's an important category. One of the original purposes of this CPA money uses was supposed to be for affordable housing. That's been a category that's been lacking. So I'm thrilled that we do have a proposal this year, and it's a valid one in my opinion, and I hope that the board will support it. My only concern is that because that project is going to be proposed on town-owned land, we really need to get the Board of Selectmen to sign off on that proposal before this board does, just like we did with the Washington Park revitalization project. I saw it over the weekend, Mike, as you sent
Yes.
it to us.
Yes.
And then I said, oops, it looks like we have another project that's on town land and we need to get it out over to the Board of Selectmen. Now, the Board of Selectmen is meeting Monday, but the agenda's already set. So two weeks after that, I think it'll be February 2nd. Maybe we can get it on the agenda that night and still give this board time to be able to, if we approve it, put it on a warrant. Yeah, every 2 weeks, so February 26th.
26,
So the only thing that, if we can't do it because we missed it, then the only thing we can do is this board can, if we decide to vote on it, we have to do a conditional
Yeah.
approval, meaning subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen. But we want to remember from here on out that if we do anything on town-owned property, we have to get the Board of Selectmen first to look at it and endorse it, like we did with the Washington Park. We had an extra meeting just for that, Washington Park one night, on a Friday in December, so that we can get it synchronized for this board to see it after the Board of Selectmen endorsed it, so.
That's in the RFP, that you're supposed to get approval from whoever controls the property, and I suspect that it was just
It's an
overlooked.
oversight.
Oversight, yes. So I think your suggestion probably makes the most sense, is get on the agenda for February 9th, and we can vote
Okay.
conditionally next week.
Okay. So if you guys wanna send that to Denise and make that request, that would be great. Do it February 9th. So here we keep the process flowing.
Okay. Don't mind me just making a few notes. Okay. All right, so I think we're ready to start the presentations here.
Could I just mention one thing
Yes.
on the other side, just as a matter of correction?
Oh, sure,
On number 3, the Langley Adams Library Historic Document Preservation.
yes.
It has 2 asterisks, additional grants will be available once the project is approved. We have applied for and been granted $4,200 for the initial study.
Oh, yes. 4,200 LTSA,
LSTA.
LSTA. Yeah, so add that down there on the project list. The 2-star at the 2 asterisks, they've already received $4,200 grant from the state. Really, that should be counted as matching. So I'll update this
Thanks,
list and
Mike.
send it out to everybody.
Thank you.
So out of the total project cost of $50,988, 4,200 grants have come in?
No, actually, it would be 54,
Okay.
55. We'll add the 4,200 to the
Add to it.
project cost.
Okay.
4,200's already been received.
Okay, so you'll update that.
Yes.
That was for the initial assessment, which we presented next week.
Any other, and I have questions, I put the matches here, the other match, that I'm not, that we've got to ask specifically more about is the Washington Park project, but when, Erin comes, we can do that. I've got a sheet actually that I'll pass out at that time to kind of clarify the costs there, because I wasn't quite 100% sure of the costs on that project. But the other ones, I believe, are all right off the project presentation packages, so they should be correct.
And
Okay,
it still stands that additional grants will be available once the project is approved, once it has municipal support.
yes,
We'll be eligible to apply for different grants.
yes, yes. And, Bob, you see my note there about the cemetery? That
Right.
was my interpretation of what you put in there, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we'll hear more about the state match on the community trail project too, so. So I don't think we need to wait any longer. If we're ready to proceed, we'll have Mike Davis and Alex Johnson come up and tell us a little bit about the Groveland Community Trail Phase 2.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody. So I trust everybody received and read the proposal, has a general understanding of kind of where we're going with the conversation. So I think it'd be useful to do a quick recap of the project, just to remind anybody who's not as familiar with it, anybody listening at home. We can recap last year's town meeting, the successes that we've seen with the dollars that we got approved last year, what that all brings to the table this year, and then kind of a general timeline of what to expect as we continue on the journey with the project. So the trail itself, again, is a 3.25 mile shared use rail trail path, similar to what you would find in Danvers, Topsfield, Salisbury, Newburyport, dozens of other towns across the state that have these shared use type paths. Our path would be essentially two connecting segments, one on road from here along Main Street down to Base Bridge, to Shanahan Field, to 441 Main Street, Old Nasty property. That would then turn off-road along the National Grid corridor, heading southeast to King Street along the right-of-way, and that's 1.95 miles. So again, the vision of the project overall has always been to offer safe, healthy, scenic pedestrian transportation and recreation for all ages and abilities for folks here in town. The function of the project is to connect multiple educational, recreational, municipal, residential, urban open space by means of pedestrian alternative transportation. The funding for the project overall will essentially be two parts. There's the design costs and there's the construction costs. Again, the town is responsible for the design costs. Mass DOT, state grants, publicly available funds will then pay for the construction. And I think the biggest benefit all along from a dollars perspective is the dollars that we invest is matched 8 to 10-fold from the state for construction funds. So it's a very high return on investment for a very long-term lasting benefit to the town. And overall, no taxes will be raised, have been raised or will be raised for the project itself. So coming into last year, we had requested $150,000 to kickstart the design. We had planned on a 10% design being ready for the on-road and the off-road segment by this time. As you remember, there were multiple speakers in support. We had multiple letters of recommendation and support, and a very strong verbal vote from voters at the meeting, favorable actions from the Board of Selectmen and from Finance. So I think that it was very encouraging for us to get such strong positive feedback in a public vote like that. So what we then had were the funds to take a great idea and move it into a project based on some engineering fact and really be able to engage the public on what this can look like. So the first step we did was we confirmed title work. So we had an attorney confirm that National Grid owns cleanly in title the right-of-way segment from Main Street to King Street. So no private property should be impacted. There should be no claims, easements, anything like that. National Grid owns the property for every piece that we need to develop the proposed trail, which was a huge win. We then moved forward with an RFP led by Denise in the Finance Department for an engineer partner. We ultimately selected Faceboff and Thorndike in Wilmington, or in Burlington. They have made great progress, and what they've done is taken the rail trail segment, the right-of-way segment, to a 25% design. So we'll have a 25% design draft in hand this month, and we'll have a 10% design for the on-road segment from them around this time too. So where that's accelerated from last year is we were expecting a 10% design on the whole path. We now have a 25% design, which is a significant milestone from a design consideration standpoint for the right-of-way segment. So that's what we're here talking about now this year, is for that rail trail piece. We have made really good awareness with National Grid. So Alex and I met with Stephen Toll in January of last year. So Stephen is the one single individual at National Grid that will help navigate both the lease agreement and the design considerations back and forth. We have an open line with him. He's awaiting our 25% design to engage formally.
Mike, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
It's worth pointing out that the one of the main advantages of getting to a 25% design this year, and I think we talked about this last year, that one of the challenges with a project like this is you have to have a lot of foresight and a lot of patience, because these things don't happen overnight. And so one of the challenges when people are thinking about this project is, how do I think out 8, 10, 11 years, because that's typically how long these projects take. And so every little bit of time that we can shave clearly is a period of time that we're going to get to use that trail sooner and better. And so one of the critical facts about that 25% milestone is that it gets us to a point where we can actually get into the state TIP funding or start having discussions with MassDOT about getting into the TIP funding queue, which is a really critical and frankly a big hurdle to get over. And so getting to 25% this year literally saves us at least a year in the process over what we had anticipated before. So it's a really critical.
Yes, it's the formal anchor that gives us the ability to engage with Mass DOT and National Grid for the discussion, which is, to your point, very long. We found some very positive success from both Senator Bruce Tarr and Lenny Mira, Representative Lenny Mira. So we invited Representative Mira to an MVPC meeting in 2013. He was very positive about the idea of bike paths and whatnot. So we've kept him informed. Alex and I met with the both of them in Boston in December. And there's a letter of support in the proposal that was submitted. It's really two things to call out there. One, that Massachusetts continues to demonstrate an ability and an interest in funding these types of projects. And secondly, that if we should request their support, they're ready to support us in those conversations and moving through, once it gets to the funding level, while respecting all the local decisions that still have to be made. Another big thing that we've finally got nailed down just this last couple of weeks, we're going to host 4 public forums with the engineer in February, March, and in April. So those 4 meetings will be, one will be with direct abutters. So I think it's a very unique group that we to meet with individually. So the folks who, there's 54 owners along the right of way that we would bring to the meeting, or at least let them know about the meeting. And anybody within a certain proximity to the trail. That'd be one meeting. That'd be the first meeting. We would meet with Whitestone Village as our second meeting. I think we have a very unique proximity and interest in the trail being developed and being shared with us. Third would be with the Board of Selectmen on March 23rd. That would be a televised event, so it would be much more public. And then we'd have a town-wide forum 2 weeks before town meeting. So we would make U.S. Postal Service direct mail announcements to the abutting property owners for that first meeting. And I think that's been feedback that we've gotten, is that we need to notify these folks formally. So we've heard that, and we'll do that. Whitestone, we have a meeting that they're going to host, that they're going to bring folks to. And then the Board of Selectmen, the other ones will announce how we can get the word out. I think another encouraging piece that's been called out by this board more than once is the maintenance piece. So we've learned some very encouraging feedback from both Danvers and Salisbury. I think the overall feedback is the dollars required and the manpower required for this type of maintenance is quite minimal on the scale of maintenance. And really through basic community fundraising and volunteerism, it's more than enough to mitigate any concerns around maintenance.
So fundraising and volunteerism will keep it
Yes,
from overgrown,
absolutely.
shoveled, and
Shoveling piece, that's still, those types of specifics would be debated, and do we want to plow it, do we want to keep it unplowed? So those types of conversations, those are still the TBDs. But as far as the basic annual maintenance,
it's done by volunteers.
and we could certainly talk offline about it, but it's minimal, and it's really no concern at this point for anybody that we've talked to, the engineer, so it's, I think we were very encouraged to find that in other towns that are very comparable to what
Right.
we're proposing, which was good news. Yep.
So National Grid doesn't even know we exist, and Mass DOT doesn't even know we exist unless we come up with 25% of the 500 that we need to design the on-road and off-road components, and that's where we're at now, correct? But that's what you mean when you say formally submit 25% design plan to National Grid.
The 25% design plan is different from the funding level. So,
Yes.
so the funding level that we've accomplished so far, so the first 150,000 that we've
150 that
accomplished
was
last year.
approved at town meeting last year.
So that was enough to fund our design through what they call a 25%. And of course, the percentages that they use in these engineering design projects are not representative of the percentage through the project. I mean,
Of the
essentially, yeah. So 25% is far beyond 25%, and then you get to 75%, and you're basically already at 100%. So it's that said, they use these terms as formal terms, as road marks, or road marks for National Grid and the state to understand where you are in the process. So a quote-unquote 25% design has certain standards, certain elements to it that have to be met in order for it to reach that level. And so we've met that at that
We
point.
met that with the 150,000.
Correct.
And that brings us at the beginning of a queue, as you call it,
Yep,
that will allow the state to give us money to construct what we eventually design.
we have to start the discussions, but yeah, and yes, it allows us to get into those discussions, which ultimately will put us into the queue.
So the $200,000 total cost of designing the, that would be the off-road, and the 300 for the on-road, do I have that correct?
Vice versa.
Vice versa, okay. So the total 500. When would construction actually begin? At the end of all design work, which could take 10 years? Or are you talking about 8 to 10 years to do design work plus construct it?
So, yeah,
go
so
ahead.
as I understood it from the engineer, get the 25% design, which is the formal trigger to start the conversation. That
Which
gets
is where
submitted,
we're at now.
Which is where we'll be at after we get public comment on the draft.
Of
and then we
course.
get it submitted. Okay. From that point of submission through the construction, it goes through 75% design, 100% design, it's a final PS&E. Those things are all worked through the process and funded as you go. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does, that's fine.
Okay.
But yes, the construction is at the
Sure.
end of that timeline, so, so you essentially get funded in one lump sum at the
Oh.
back end of the process.
Okay.
So there is some period of time, part of the reason you try to get the process started is because there's some large design pieces and some large pieces of the queue and the discussions that take time, that are iterative, back and forth with National Grid, back and forth with the state. All that has to happen over time. At some point in time, at the end of this, let's say whatever the period, 7, 8, 9 years, right, they eventually will fund the project. And at that point, hopefully all your design is done, all your other logistics are done, you've satisfied all your butters, you've satisfied the town, and essentially you're ready to lay it down. The construction itself at that point, my understanding, it doesn't necessarily take that long in the grand scheme of things. But it's largely the logistics you have to work through to get to that point. The on-road portion is similar to the off-road portion. The reason why we focus on the off-road portion first is because there's that added element of challenge with National Grid.
So from a helicopter view, it could take 4 to 6 years to design and 6 to 8 to build it.
Yeah, but those timelines are running in parallel.
They're running.
So it's not 6 plus 8.
Oh, I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, so you're 4 to 6 out from the design process,
Yeah.
you're 6 to 8 out from when we hope we would start building it.
Okay, one last question. On the route on Main Street, when I'm in front of 441 Main Street, I'm gonna take a left, walk across the street, and get onto the corridor of National Grid.
Correct.
From that point forward, all the way to Keene Street, it's all free and clear, title-wise?
That's the tax.
You're not gonna need to take a right on that corridor and go alongside the former SD property, correct? You're only gonna go to Main Street, take a left.
Well, the plan for the Groveland Community Trail, so if you recall, and so that's good context. So, for the time being, the reason why this is being proposed as the Groveland Community Trail, and the reason it's being designed the way it is for now, is because it will, for the time being, it will be a standalone resource for the town of Groveland. So we try to get as much stretch, as much connectivity as we could within the town. The rail trail portion, so the corridor portion that runs from Estes, or former Estes, down to King Street, that portion ultimately and ideally would connect with Bradford portions or Haverhill portions and Georgetown portions to connect on one end into the Border to Boston Trail, which is already in existence, and on the other end into the Bradford Rail Trail, which then goes to downtown Haverhill. And so those portions are expected ultimately at some point further down the road, beyond the timeline we're talking about. The reason being that Haverhill's already got some rail trail portions they're working on the other end, and Georgetown likewise has already been engaged heavily they've actually got 3 sections of rail trail in their town, 2 of which are related to the Border to Boston section, and those are what they've been working on for the last number of years. And so the thought is both of those towns have shown their interest in these projects and are committed to doing the projects based on the meetings we've had with them, but they are expected to be behind us by a couple of years because they have other trail portions they're working. So for the time being, it's a standalone portion held within the town, with the idea that that portion you referenced that goes to the right by Estes or by the former Estes property and would in theory go over Johnson Creek and into Haverhill will be developed at some point down the road when it makes sense to connect into Haverhill.
That's not this project?
Nope.
right? Very good.
So the total cost, if I could ask, is upwards of $4 to $5 million for 3.25 miles.
Correct.
And Groveland's portion of it from CPA funds is $500,000.
Correct.
And the funds come from Mass Department of Transportation, so that's tax money as well.
They
Okay.
come, correct, they come from the TIP program. Primarily from the
Just
TIP
wanted to
program, yes.
clarify that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess once you get to the point of talking with the DOT about getting the funds and grants, how certain is it that you get the funds and grants? Has there been any towns that have been denied the grants that spent all the money on design and stuff phase and?
I can't say that nationally there haven't been any towns that have had issues getting the grant. I would say that before we even entered this process, before we even went into the warrant process last year, there were extensive discussions with Merrimack Valley Planning Commission and other regional associations really about the process and about the priorities. And one of the things that is important to note about this is that the reason it's attractive, the reason it's a worthwhile project is because of its strategic location. That where we are provides strategic connectivity between downtown Haverhill into the border to Boston Trail, which is an existing priority network. And so one of the goals that FST, that our engineer has, is to get us onto the priority.
Bay State Greenway Priority 100?
Right, so the Bay State Greenway Priority 100, which is essentially a list that the state identifies as these are the top 100 greenways they intend to focus on in the nearer term. And so that's a critical list. Everybody we've talked to in this process believes that this trail has a very viable likelihood of being on that list. So,
Which prioritizes that funding.
The funding,
right,
so that we can start the actual construction.
correct.
I don't know if there's anything else that we wanted to.
Mike, what if we decided not to, well, better way of phrasing the question. So if we approve this project, we'll be $300,000 into it. Roughly, you're saying you need to come back for another $200,000 to do the on-road piece, the planning. So is that potentially, could it be next year or the year after or the year after? How much time will we have to do the final 200,000 piece?
I think that's to the discretion of, to the extended parties. I don't think we have a direct answer to that. I mean, it could be, we could come back next year, we could come back 2 years.
I mean, ultimately, the short answer is we definitely have more time.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the design process for the right-of-way portion is gonna involve National Grid, which means a lot more iterations and a lot more time. Ultimately, there's advantages to trying to fund the on-road portion sooner rather than later, only because ultimately that will also, at least the intention is that will also get funded through the same TIP funding. And so ideally, you would get into the queue at the same time for both of them, so that when it's done, it's all done at the same time. I think, I think people would enjoy having the whole trail sort of developed at the same time. That said, if we decide, the on-road portion has to wait, then the on-road portion waits, and we do it at a later time and add it on. But it's a fair question.
When we have the state's attention, because we've done the necessary design,
Yeah.
similar to a question related to what Mike just brought up. Is there an expectation that we need to now approve the rest of the funds at some kind of accelerated fashion? I mean, can we?
It's a question that we should raise when we first initiate those conversations,
Yeah.
so that we can come back to you if we think that's necessary.
Okay, that's fine.
Again,
So if we come up with 300,000, and we wanna take a year off from doing any more, are we going to lose favor with the state in terms of priority of queuing? The queue that we might be in?
I don't think so. Worst case, and I mean worst case in theory would be that they would bifurcate the two pieces, and they would only slot us in for the off-road portion, which again, frankly, is the, logistically speaking, or politically speaking, is probably the harder of the two. So, you know, but yeah, that would be worst case, is we wouldn't get in the queue necessarily at the same time for the onward portion, so you might have to wait a year or two or a couple years down the road to do the onward. Again, it's all, you know, these are all logistics we're working through this project. Yeah.
So do we have, I'm trying to recap in my mind. We have the 25% design portion done at this point, so you guys could start talking to Mass DOT and National Grid without this $150,000 funding, or you need this 150 to talk to them?
Well, we can initiate the conversations, but we can't take it anywhere from there, because essentially the expectation is at this point, we're in a position where we now begin all the iterations between MassDOT and National Grid and anybody else who has to be involved, to start working through all the variations of, okay, you've got to deal with this challenge or this obstacle or this allowance, or we got to move this pole, or whatever the issue is. There's a lot of back and forth over the next year or two to go through that process, and that's what the next $150,000 essentially helps to fund.
No other questions? Okay.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, next on the agenda is supposed to be Washington Park.
Just right
Joe thinks they're outside.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just asked.
You're perfectly able to get chairs and sit down. And I prefer that, because I don't like seeing people standing in the back of the room.
I'm just following the lead.
Thank God this project is controlled by women.
I keep sneaking to peek.
Definitely an advantage.
Okay, so our next project presentation is the Washington Park Revitalization Project for Washington Park, and it's presented to us by Groveland Baseball League, and Aaron Pinkham is here to tell us a little bit about the project. So we've got about 15 minutes, and then we've built in about 5 more minutes for questions and answers, but probably we'll ask questions, we may ask questions as we go along. So you got about 20 minutes or so.
Okay. All right, well, my name is Erin Pinkham, and we're here to present our project that we'd like to do for Washington Park. I have with me Lisa Sewup and Melissa Van Huska. Unfortunately, Joe Sullivan is traveling and he's unable to be here tonight. So the first thing that I'd like to say is Washington Park is pretty important to Groveland baseball. It's where we play all of our games. We started off this past year with some improvements of our own. We incorporated a new scoreboard and we just installed a new fence. So we've already invested our own time and effort into the property. We provide most all of the maintenance on the property ourselves in terms of field preservation as well as any upkeep that we need to along the way. At this point, we can't fix everything that's left to be fixed at the property. So we are looking for funding to bring our park back up to where it really should be, because it's a property that's used by a lot of people in town. It has a playground that could be so much better than it is, and it's really an asset to the community. So with these line items, I think that it can be much better, and it's definitely something that we can't financially do alone any further. So the first thing that we'd like to have done is to repave the western parking lot. It's got a couple of different options and ways that we have gotten estimates to complete the project. One way is to completely remove the existing parking lot and repave it. The other way is to put recycled asphalt on top of it to fill in the holes and put in a 2-inch binder on top of that to get it to be a smooth, more workable surface. In my opinion, I don't think that anything has been done to that parking lot in probably 30 years because it's still got the tennis court green on it from back in the 80s. The second thing is that there's a huge fence problem at the park. We really need to fix some of the dysfunctional and unsafe chain link. There are backstops and gate work that need to be completely removed and new fencing be installed. There are fences that are buckled. There are protrusions of fencing at eye level that are in need of a repair. And by doing the repair work, we need to just take it all down and put up new stuff. It was also, from what I've been told, installed incorrectly such that the fabric, the chain link part is installed on the wrong side of the poles. They should be on the inside of the field. So the fencing project will encompass all 3 of the field areas, not just one at the majors field. It extends a huge area around the park. The third one is that we really need a new backstop netting in the majors field. It's rotted, it's got holes in it. The tree line really needs to be cut back so that when it is raised, that it doesn't get caught up in the branches. I believe that that's something that perhaps the tree warden can take care of before a new one can be installed. We've, in the past, taken care of that ourselves, but it takes a couple of guys all weekend long with tall ladders to try to get up the 30 feet that the fence goes up. I've also asked for new aluminum bleachers. The bleachers that we have there are really very tired. They're warped and splintered wood. They've been there for as long as I can remember, as I grew up in town and played there when I was a kid. They're the same ones. I'd also like to install overhead lighting on the 50-70 field, which is the current AAA field, if you're familiar with the park at all. The Groveland Baseball League has left Little League, and now we're part of a new baseball league, which we've started to move our fields around. We have a 50-70 field that we will be having our majors division play on. And at this point, we can't play on that field past probably 7 o'clock because there's no lighting. The draw would be also to be able to have tournament play, where when we were part of a Little League program, we couldn't play any tournament games that were for Williamsport on the field that is there because we didn't have lighting. The sixth one is that we'd like to install 10-foot warning tracks along the outfield fences on the Majors field, the 50-70 field, and the AAA field, with the addition of the new fencing on the 50-70 field and the switching of the fields. It'll give the kids an opportunity to know where the fences are before they slam into them when they're fielding the ball. The last one, before we get to the playground, is to build weather-resistant bottom rails on all 6 dugouts. The dugouts have gotten to the point where they really need to have a weather-resistant rail on them to prevent further rotting of the boards. So this installation of the board around the bottom will help to prevent and maintain the structure of the 6 dugouts. I'd like to turn over now the playground aspect of it to Marissa, and she can tell you what our playground project includes.
Okay, so what we're proposing for the playground is a 7,400 square foot area, so it's really overhauling that whole grass area that has the current playground structure, part of the swings, and some of the seating area. So what it would be, there would be a fabric underlay, and then there would be engineered wood carpet on top of that, and then there'd be a new play structure, and there'd be a toddler area. So the whole playground would be for kids 2 to 12, and so there'd be a toddler area. There would be a larger play area, which is more like an obstacle. So if you look at the pictures, you can see it goes in a circle. So it's meant to be for the older kids, and it's to be used as an obstacle course, so to get some exercise out of it, really. And then we would move the sandbox, and we would put in 8 swings and 6 benches so parents could watch. And then there'd be a covered area with 4 picnic tables. So I think you can see that in the picture. And the idea is really to make Washington Park a place for families to go as well, and have that be a play area that siblings can play in, even baseball players after their games. That is how it's used now, but I think it would be more functional the way that we're proposing it. And it also would meet ADA guidelines, which the current structure does not, and all safety requirements.
I mentioned that we've already put improvements into the ballpark ourselves for Groveland baseball, but I also wanted to say that we have donations to repaint all of the structures, including the snack shack, by Sew Up Painting when we are completely ready and are prepared to finish up the project. That'll be like the icing on the cake to have freshly painted structures that'll be donated. So I think that overall, Groveland baseball and donations, if we have the opportunity to have a community build for the playground, our contribution to the project should be between $33,000 and $35,000, which is in the estimate that you should have in front of you.
Question about the playground. The Dibble Parks is the source of the playground. The estimate is $108,000 and change. But if we do, I'm trying to understand, we're gonna do $21,000 worth of installation. We're gonna save $21,000 on that bill because we're gonna install it ourselves.
Yes.
Volunteers.
We said if we could get 80 to 100 people, which we are confident that we can do. As you can see, we have lots of manpower here with us tonight. But I think more importantly, what is so important about that is this is our way of involving the whole town, involving the whole community, and this will be something that will bring the whole town together. It's not just for baseball, but this would also be a park for all kids here in town. So I think it's
I think it's a cool thing.
And currently, Groveland doesn't really have a comprehensive park. The park at the Pines is, we mentioned it at the last meeting when we came to you, that it's kind of unusable at this point with the construction equipment that's down there, as well as the fact that the road is kind of all up in arms at this point. This one at Washington Park will be centrally located for all age groups, and I think it would be a tremendous asset to be able to get everybody in town excited about it and be able to be involved in the completion of it. When we met with Mr. Dibble, sorry, when we met with him, he was telling us about how it can help to really bring a community together to build something and have such a huge accomplishment when you're done. Yeah, and with it getting done in a weekend, the kids can play on it, the next day. And even kids as young as 12 can help out during the build. So I think it'd be a really great opportunity for lots of people to get involved. And
So he would supervise, obviously, and work with us and tell us exactly, give us a list of what tools he would provide, what tools we would need to provide to get donated or volunteered or whatever. And so it would be a big group effort to pull it off, but I'm pretty confident we can get it done.
Would you be able to save any of the elements or use any of the elements that are there right now in the playground to incorporate them in, or is this a complete replacement of everything that's
It would
there?
be a complete replacement.
What would you propose to do with what's there, the existing playground equipment?
he believes that we should be able to get some kind of monetary compensation for it as scrap. It doesn't currently meet the safety codes and the ADA codes. He also told us that he is a proponent of recycling aspects if we can. At this point, I think we're beyond that. Lisa and I went to the park today and we found a dedication sign that said that park, the playground unit, was dedicated in April of 2003, but it was donated from the town of Burlington. So when Burlington originally installed it, we don't know, but
Right.
it's been at our park for 14 years. 12 years, sorry.
So in their assessment, none of those elements are safe and ADA compliant and so forth. So if it were to be repurposed, say, to the Bagnell School or something like that, it would not be a wise decision to do that.
That is his opinion.
That was his professional.
Primarily financially good for scrap.
Correct.
Erin, I passed out to the committee this analysis sheet that I had sent you previously. And so there's a column there for donated costs, which is basically the work you've already invested in doing the scoreboard and outfield fence. And then there's the painting donation and the in-kind volunteer effort to install the playground versus what Dibble would charge you to install it. So that comes to about $32,000. I guess the place that I'm not quite sure of where to go with is I went through and picked the lowest. You have a number of estimates in there, which is great. That definitely helps to kind of put a finger on the cost. But the lowest cost, when I added it all up, came to $187,442, and the highest cost came to $303,555. So, and what you're requesting here in the proposal is $290,000. So obviously, you've picked a way of doing this, but maybe you can explain to us why wouldn't we go with the $187,442 plan since it's a lot cheaper?
Well, when I was looking at the numbers, I had mentioned to you that they don't match up. And I think it's probably because when we initially went through and did a lot of the estimates, they were kind of all over the map. In particular, the different ways that we could do the parking lot. There was a $10,000 swing with that. So when I originally did my estimation, I went on the high side of everything, and then I subtracted out the cost of what we provided, including, which would be the $32,000. So there's a $10,000 discrepancy from what I can see. If you take the high side of everything minus out the $32,000.
I think the biggest difference is in the lighting.
Definitely.
So is that 46,000 for Groveland Municipal, is that in addition or instead of the installation of the materials and?
Instead of, when we got the lighting from Musco Lighting, they're like the top of the line stadium lighting, like what you see at Fenway Park. It also includes a 25-year maintenance contract. We didn't know where to go for lighting, so we went with what we were familiar with, and then why don't we hit up the light department? Clearly, the light department can do it much less expensive. They did the ones at the park that we have currently. I don't know what the cost was. I don't know if it was donated. It was back in 2007 is when those lights went in. So there's a clear, distinct winner right there. But as for the 10,000, the extra 10,000, I'm sorry, but I can't account for that. Perhaps my
Okay.
math is incorrect.
But Erin, in essence, we can subtract 100,000 from what you've asked because of the lights.
I think so, unless for some reason the light department comes back and says, I can't do it for that amount, and it's gotta be $10,000 or $20,000 more. I don't know how that all works.
Maybe what you can do is talk to Groveland Electric again, because it's so significant. The other things, what happens when the projects get voted in is it may end up being none of these vendors who actually do it, because we put out the town puts out a request for proposals, and then all kinds of people bid on it. And usually, it's almost always ends up being cheaper than what we voted. So, that's gonna happen, but on the lighting, it's such a significant difference that what I'd like to see is if Groveland Electric can do what you want, and we can take $100,000 off of the proposal, instead of it making it $290, make it $190, that will make the project more appealable,
Well,
I
I can
guarantee.
also tell you that we presented Groveland Light with exactly what we were looking for. So the quotes are, the same number of poles, the same number of lighting, it's just that we're here.
Yeah,
And if we need a light bulb changed, they're here. We
Yes.
don't have to pay them to do that. So I don't know if I can speak for them too, but I would feel comfortable saying that $100,000 right there
Yeah.
is reasonable, because
And we got the quote from Groveland Electric, it's been within the last 2 months, so
Yeah.
it's pretty much to match what we already have. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the fields, but the lighting that we currently have, it's the same lighting on the center field.
and they itemized right down to the washers that they needed for the project. So I would imagine that it's gotta go up a little bit for,
Yeah.
cost
So-
of the year, but.
so would you feel comfortable then if we, instead of the CPA funding request being $290, we made it $190?
I would be comfortable with that.
I might add a little bit of contingency.
Yeah,
I don't want to
me
get
too.
into the Washington, the
Well,
Washington
yes,
Hall issue where
no, obviously.
some costs may come in a little higher once you really kind of vet everything out and determine exactly what you want to need, so.
Right, so we
I'd be
could
more
make it
comfortable with like
$200,000, right?
Yeah, just because it looks like the other thing was there's a $10,000 swing on the parking lot. And one option is just to lay asphalt. And then the option to completely revamp it is about $10,000 more, but
Right.
that's more expensive work, so.
And it's going to probably last twice as long.
Yeah, so we might need to
Exactly.
look at that. And I do want to point out too, the maintenance looked like it was going to be another $75,000 for.
The light bulb goes.
That's the installation
installation.
cost.
Gotcha.
And that includes the maintenance of
Fee.
25
So
years.
they probably don't.
So their material cost alone was just $70,000, and then the installation was additional 75.
And I believe the way that Groveland Electric works is you will receive a bill every month, it covers the use of the lighting. And they maintain it, because we have the same thing at Beasley Park, we have lighting there. We just pay the bill every month, and if there's a problem with it, they come and fix it. If it needs a new bulb, they come and fix it, and then we don't pay for that. So, versus us owning the lights. So that's why we went with that. So I suspect it's probably would be the same thing.
Yeah, I don't see an indication of something along those lines. in the-
We do pay the bill,
Yeah.
You pay the bill currently.
but
for
they
the
don't,
other-
but they don't change any light bulbs. That I'm aware of. We have lights out in the fields, don't we, boys?
I think so.
And who's
Call 'em
replaced
up.
those historically?
We have,
Yeah, okay.
which is, you know, you can imagine, that's not easy,
But are
right?
those lighting that Groveland Electric put in,
Yes.
Yes.
No, I don't believe they did. No.
if they didn't put it in, then Groveland Electric is not gonna change the bulbs. But if Groveland Electric puts it in, they change the bulbs.
I'm not sure who put it in.
Yeah, well, you know, it's worth asking, I think,
Might buy
again.
the bulbs, they got the truck that can get up there.
I mean, I think if that, what happens with the old lights, I guess it, at this point doesn't matter. We're talking about the new lights,
Yes.
and if Groveland puts them in, my assumption is that I would be able to call them and say, I have a light bulb out, I don't have a bucket truck, you do, and you take care of that for me. I think that's reasonable.
Right,
And if they charge me for the light bulb, I'll pay them for the light bulb. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
I think that that's the reasonable
We'll have to raise the
route to
price of
go.
hot dogs.
It might be happening anyway.
Okay, so Erin, you're comfortable if we do this at 200,000?
I would suggest 220.
I agree.
Yeah.
With that, that's the 200, which includes the more expensive paving
Okay.
plus a 10% contingency.
Are you comfortable with that, Erin?
I am, I also have a couple of questions that perhaps you can answer me as well, if we've reached the question and answer
Sure.
portion. I would like to know, what happens if we don't get 3 bids for a portion of it?
You have to. And the other thing is that the whole project is considered the cost. So you can't go to a vendor, say for the netting or something, it's gonna be $10,000, say, well, we'll just use vendor A because that's only $10,000 below the $25,000. You can't do that. It's looked at as the project would be $220, so you have to get bids from 3 bids for everything you do. Claire can tell you what you have to go through with that, Claire.
So you'll be working with the finance director on that.
Yes.
There are some specialties where you may not be able to get 3, but if you've gone through your due diligence and followed the state regulations on how you advertise and everything, if you only get 2 or even 1, as long as you've met the advertisement requirements, you're all set.
Okay.
So, and then Denise is fully aware of that. She'll work with you on the whole project and make sure it's done properly.
Okay, because, for instance, the lighting, we only had 2 options.
Well, if it's town, that's outside of the bidding process, so you can just hire the town to do whatever you want.
Okay.
So that's a no.
Well, and the other question is, what happens if we get 3 bids and they're all over what we had budgeted?
Now you got $20,000 to work with, so that's
Usually it levels out because some things will end up being a little more, some will be less. And that's what the bidding process really brings it out. Most of the time, it's less.
Okay.
The only place where the increased costs come are where things you didn't really take into account happen. Like all of a sudden, somebody says, oh, you need, this kind of work done on the parking lot. Besides paving it, we need to put a gravel bed down or whatever, and it's gonna be another 10,000 or something. Usually those are the kind of things where the problems come in.
And if something like that happens, do we come back to you and we have to change the?
No, only if you go over the entire budget.
Okay.
If you went over the entire, let's say, you work on this, it gets approved and you work on it and it comes to be the end of 2015 and for some reason you had a legitimate shortfall of $10,000, you needed to finish one of the items on the list, then what you could do is come back to us next year and say, we need to do a phase 2 and we need to finish it with this. We've done that before, because it's hard, frankly, this is a big project to figure out specifically everything that's, what's gonna cost.
Right, right.
Another option we have, I'd suggest, is probably do the parking lot last. Because the town road commissioner has an annual contract with paving contractors, where we're paving streets in town, and he might be able to include this work in with the town work, and therefore save quite a bit of money on paving. And if that's done last, that can kind of be your filler to flex it and funding.
He has a contract with a tree service too. I noticed you talked about some trees that need to be attended
Yeah,
to.
the outfield for the net.
It's incredibly cheap, what they have.
But I mean, like I said, it would take a couple of our guys all weekend or longer to get up there repeatedly. and
They
do
got
the
liability
lessons.
problems too, you don't want to do that.
Well, no, we don't, but we've done it.
I know, we all have
We've
done it. My experience in the bidding process, and she's very, very professional, she'll walk you right through the whole thing, is that the people who bid on these things are pretty savvy. They will do their homework, and they will know how much money you got. The good ones will. Those are the ones that will come in, and if you say you think it's gonna cost $20,000, guess what? They'll be right there at $20,000, because they know, because this is all open meeting, and it's all laid out here, and they know exactly how much money you got. And the good contractors will come right in and, okay, we can do that. So I don't think you'll find that it's gonna go over.
Okay. I also would like to say that our time frame realistically should be by the end of this year, if everything goes smoothly and according to plan. I really don't think that we'll have much of a delay in terms of having the people that are going to implement it. It's just a matter of making sure that everything's lined up and getting done.
So the way,
Yeah, go ahead.
the way the funding goes, the funds would be available July 1.
Correct.
And then,
So-
Or gangbusters after that.
So what I would suggest is, the best thing to do is, if it's voted in a town meeting, right after that, start working with Denise and get on her, so she knows what your time frame is and kind of bumps you along with the bidding process and stuff.
Can they put out an RFP before July 1?
yes, you just
Oh,
can't
yeah,
sign the contract until after
Exactly.
July 1.
Right.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's been my experience, is if you hold off and think, well, I can't do anything until July 1, you're already behind the 8 ball. You ought to just start immediately
Yeah,
after
so
town meeting and go for it.
April, the day after town meeting, you can go right and start, that gives you kind of like a
Couple of
2-month
months.
leg up, yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, first week of July, sign all the contracts and then build it.
Excellent.
Does anybody know, do you know who owns the buses, why they park there? If we're gonna build a brand new parking.
Completely agree.
I also, I think it's quite possible that we're gonna attract more people, maybe more parking. And,
I don't know that that will really be an issue. In terms of the baseball playing time, it will be the same. There'll be the same number of games. It'll just be different people coming to the park. As far as attracting a lot of people to the playground aspect of it, even if there's a horde of people on the playground, that parking lot's pretty big for just the playground, in my opinion. I don't know where else you would put parking.
I just hate to
otherwise.
make an investment, and I would be inclined to going with the more robust pavement, more durable, longer term, and then end up parking the buses on it. Bless you. So nobody knows? Okay, then I'll find out. I'll make some inquiries and find out.
I mean,
Is
it's
there
been
any
a long,
flexibility in terms of having those buses parked elsewhere.
it's been a long-standing problem in town.
Yeah.
So the Board of Selectmen has jurisdiction over all the town property, and you look at all the buses parked here, you look at Perry Park, you look at, we had quite a problem at Shanahan for a long time with all kinds of people parking down there. So I assume the town does not have a policy on people parking on public property.
That's a good assumption. You certainly don't have a bylaw. I want to commend you all because, you know, when you look at other projects, open space has been a big commitment, affordable housing has been a small commitment, historic, I mean, a lot of things are invisible, are not quite visible to everyone. This is a real centerpiece for our town. This is an amazing facility that will be visible and enjoyed by a lot of people. And I also, you know, there's some people that are a little concerned or might even be outright critical about the use of CPA funds, and maybe we shouldn't keep this commitment at 3% and go down to 1%. But you know, at the end of the day, this is a great example of improving our quality of life. You look at the big picture, in 10 years we spent $1.8 million of CPA money on open space. It's not necessarily a bad thing, that's not an editorial, but we've only spent $82,000. The smallest category was recreation. So you folks are coming in with a big project, but nothing's been done in 10 years, really. Or more. And in that
But Joe, we also could not.
You could not. Until they changed the law a year or two ago, nothing could be done for recreation.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, when I first got your proposal, I was gonna come in and say, well, this is completely out of the scope of what CPA allows, until I really realized, really got into the law, got onto the CPA website to see what other cities and towns are doing and what the changes in the law have enabled now. And it used to be you had to have a CPA, you actually had to own the property under CPA, and then you could put a park and you could put ball fields on it. They changed all that law now. And so you see, go and look up North Andover, what North Andover has done. They've actually got $1 million park there. They've restored one. It's just amazing they put that kind of money, and all CPA money. And so now you can restore parks and playgrounds and ball fields and all that, which is great.
Right, so like, Joe, before we could have done the new sand pits, we could have done that with fields, because we just bought it.
Right.
If we, except we didn't buy it with CPA funds, so it was, we would just qualify ourselves there too.
Exactly right.
You had to buy the land with CPA.
Yeah, that was the
And that's
difference.
the
That
change in the
difference.
law.
2 years ago,
2
that's
years
what
ago,
changed.
right. So you think about it, you know, how can we get this town to support an override or a debt exclusion to do a project of this sort? So I commend you for the project, but I'm also professing my continued support and belief that CPA funding is a great way to go, and especially at the rate that we do it at 3%, which triggers the maximum state matching. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
What kind of matching do we get from the state at 1%? If we decided as a town, we decided to go from 3% CPA funding, surcharge on our tax bill, bring it down to 1%, what type of funding would we get from the state?
They have a real hard to understand formula, but because we're in 3%, you get to go through 3 rounds of funding. So if you have only 1% or less, you only go through round 1, which typically is somewhere in the 35 to 40% match. We got, because we went through 3 rounds, last year we got 57%, in the previous year we got 100%. And only 17 other towns got as much as we did, so that's pretty good.
Well, thank you very much for all the work you've done, and
You're welcome.
thank you for coming in.
I appreciate your time.
Great.
Thank you.
So now we've got only ourselves here, so we can rush them a little bit more.
Good job.
Look what's going on in the rest of the city.
Yeah.
How the law has changed.
That's gonna be good.
All right, so the
playground, we need desk work.
The next presentation will be from the Cemetery Commission. Bob Guptill is here, and he's going to tell us about the third project, which is the entrance to, restoring the entrance to Riverview Cemetery.
So I'll put my cemetery commissioner hat on and go from that perspective. In 2012, you appropriated money for a preservation plan from CPA funds. And that plan is, we have a draft now of the plan, and that's what this project is all about. We are very pleased with the preservation plan, and I hope that many of you will have an opportunity to look at it. It lays out everything that's wrong with the cemetery and everything that should be done, and it lays out a whole bunch of projects, prioritizes them and so forth, one of which is the entranceway. So a professional engineer was part of the team, the consulting team that did the preservation plan, and there was an assessment done of all of the structures in the cemetery, primarily the arch, the wall along the front of the cemetery, and the holding crypt, which is set into the side of the cemetery as you come in. It also looked at the roads and drainage, and those are separate projects that are in here, and we will be taking other avenues to get those projects done. The roads in the cemetery are terrible, they're embarrassing, and we're going to address that differently. It will not be done with any CPA money, although all those roads, I guess you could argue, are historic. They actually were all carriage roads back in the day. However, they're also town-accepted streets, and the town voted to accept those as town roads, and so it's really the town's responsibility to take care of them. I digress. So you can see our application here. We're focusing on one of the projects, again, that's in the preservation plan. Amount of money that we're requesting is $75,000. That $75,000 breaks down into two chunks. One is the budget for engineering support. A bid package will have to be put together, specifications on just what needs to be done relative to these structures, and the remaining funds, $68,000, will be for the restoration work itself. So in essence, we're talking about the 1910 archway, which is the entrance archway, granite archway that leads into the cemetery, and then the stone wall, which was done shortly after that arch was erected. It was a gift, it's a memorial. And third element is the receiving tomb, which was built in 1873. Some pointing has been done, repointing many years ago were done on the arch, and but for the most part, not really much has been done, and I think that the stone wall especially really shows its age and what its problems are. Sometimes when you have to have somebody like a professional engineer come in to show, you go in and out of that arch on a regular basis, you all drive by it, and man, it just seems okay until you actually look closely at it and have an engineer look at it. They will point out all the problems and issues with what the structure is, and that's exactly what this engineer did. The construction plans are included in here in the proposal. These are extracted from the preservation plan. They begin on page 7. And again, I've only included the wall, stone arch, and the receiving tomb. The family plot curbing, roadway, and drainage is a separate issue, as I mentioned. You can see on page 8, the front wall. Basically, it has been repaired at one point. They used the wrong mortar, and so it's the rocks are falling out, and it just really needs to be repointed. One of the caps, which is identified here, is cracked and needs to be replaced. There was an unfortunate accident 2 years ago, wintertime, where too much snow was built up and plowed into the side of the wall, and it collapsed a bit. That all needs to be repaired, and or at least the repairs that were done need to be replaced because they weren't very good. So the front wall would be all repointed, and any discrepancies or problems with it would be rectified. It also needs to be cleaned and conserved quite a bit. The entry arch, and there's more detail later on in this report, has a problem on the left-hand side, and that's the leftmost pillar. If you look at page 9, and on the left-hand side, it is separated. And as the engineer said, you know, these are not catastrophic problems. I mean, it's not like the arch is going to fall down if we don't do anything with it. It could be, we could delay it for years, I suppose, but it is in need of being cleaned, and he talks about effervescence here and so forth, and reactions with the joints and so forth, and it is. And you look closely at it, it's in need of a very good cleaning. They mentioned the vines on the right-hand side. Those vines were taken out the day that we heard that those vines shouldn't be on there, and that's a lesson there. Yeah, we have the Ivy League schools and so forth with all their vines, but any engineer will tell you, no, that's not a good thing. The roots go right into the water. The receiving tube has issues with the wings. Actually, the receiving tube is in pretty good condition. It's really a neat structure. It's kind of, I don't know, it's probably not something that most people would like to see, but it really is. It's got a vaulted ceiling in it, and so the door needs to be cleaned, and the two wings especially, you can see them there on page 9, how they're separating from the sides.
The original door.
It's the original door. Yeah. Riveted steel plates. So you can see further on the more detailed description of what the issues and what the problems are, beginning on page 16. And so he's done a very good job of pointing out everything that needs to be done. And he also has the summary of the costs on page 14. Here's the breakdown of his estimates of what it would take, or what it should take, to repair the damage. The repointing and cleaning of the entry border wall is the most expensive at $50,000, and and if you really go in there, sometimes go in through the arch and just look at the back. You don't see it so much on the front, but you can see how the rocks are actually falling out of the stone wall now. Replacing the concrete cap, and then on the entry arch, the repointing of the leaks to reset that end post at $7,500, and then $5,000 on the receiving tomb for a total of $68,000. So this is all historic structures. It is the entranceway into the cemetery. And it's going to, we have a big challenge ahead of us to restore the cemetery. It has a lot of issues, a lot of problems. It's been very well highlighted and described in the preservation plan that we received. And so we're asking if you would support the $75,000 to fix these problems. Thank you.
So Bob, this project comes out of what we funded 2 years ago when you did the plan of what needed to be done in the cemetery.
Right, this is the preservation plan. This was the $28,000 preservation
Yes.
plan here.
Yes.
And again, in fact, what I'd like to do is maybe just pass this down. It's got the whole new tree planting plans, all the roads that are going to be closed, which is probably one of the most controversial things that you'll see here, is that we're basically going to walk away from about 3/4 of the roads in the cemetery. Will never be hot topped, it will not be maintained, and many of them will just be restored back to grass. And so again, this is really quite a comprehensive plan, and I hope to ultimately we'll have a sort of an executive study of this, executive summary of it for as a handout to show you what the major recommendations are that are in it. But why don't I just slide it down that way so you guys can take a look at it, because that is a CPA product.
Yes, so, the point I wanted to make is that, the planning process is sometimes very important, and so when somebody comes in asking for plans, rather than doing something, fixing something right away, the plan sometimes is a better way to go, so they kind of have a roadmap for the future. And I think that's what was given to the Cemetery Commission in 2012 when we funded that report, because now they have a great roadmap on where to go, what's the most important things to fix, what are some things that need money, further funding from CPA, or things that they can do themselves, or things that can be incorporated in their budget. So it's a great way, and I'm happy that it's worked out that way. Do we have any other questions for Bob?
I have one question.
Sure.
So it sounds like there's a bunch of things that need to be done over time from that plan.
Yes.
Do you have any, I guess, estimate of what it would cost to do all of those projects in like a timeline, so we can try and maybe, allocate funds accordingly,
Right.
so.
Well, they pretty well have laid it out in there. Every one of the projects that they recommend, and they're all prioritized from project 1 down to however many there are. So they're all budgeted or estimated budgets, what it would cost to do them. The roads, for example, are $200,000 to $300,000. And these are only the roads that we're going to maintain. But the other details you'd have to extract from it on a project-by-project basis. We're hoping that a lot of it will be donations. When you talk about plants, for example, and trees especially, that people want to memorialize their loved ones. We have needs for benches. We have needs now. We now know where they're going to go, and they specify what kind of tree to use and so forth. So we have already received 2 grants for conservation of the Civil War headstones, and we hope to continue with that on an ongoing basis. We're also now beginning to tap our perpetual care money. A lot of people question, what about the perpetual care? The money has all been reinvested. We now are with a professional investment company. We pulled it out of the town, and where we were getting 1.6% return on investment, we're now in pretty good shape. So we will start to now use the perpetual care money for the intention and the purpose that was always there for its specific use, is to maintain that cemetery.
We've moved up from 1.6% on perpetual care.
Yeah, I don't know what exactly it is right now. It's in 2 different funds. We decided to go with a very, very conservative fund and one with a little bit more risk in it too. The principal has to be preserved, and that's in the most conservative of all the investment accounts. But the interest that we receive from it can be invested in a more aggressive type of account, and that's what we've done.
We did that with library funds years ago.
Yeah.
Bob, one of the aesthetically not so nice aspects of the arch is the chain link fence right behind it.
Isn't it nice?
Close it off. I'm wondering, is there any plan to try to replace that with something that's say cast iron or?
Yeah. We have another big chain link fence up behind the burying ground, up behind those beautiful 1700 slates, headstones, and this ugly, awful cast iron fence that goes across it. So they were locking the cemetery for a long time. The Groveland police would lock it at night at dusk and then open it up in the morning and so forth. And that just became rather unrealistic to expect, and that's what that fence was for. If I had my way, we just remove the whole thing completely, because we don't lock it now. There's no reason to close the gate, so it could be replaced. You'll also notice in their plan, they want to redesign the whole front with an island in the front, and you go one direction to the right, and then another direction come around. But the there'll be this.
So there is a plan to modify the entrance, the pavement, because it's paved right up to the granite, which is not typical either. It takes away from the aesthetic view.
They also want to use this chip seal approach too, which is, I guess, a coating that's put on it with chips or pebbles in it and so forth, and give it more of a aesthetically and a more historical look to it.
Okay, Bob, thank you. The last, excuse me, the last project presentation tonight is for the improvements to a historic building at Veazey Memorial Park, submitted by the Conservation Commission, who is in charge of Veazey Park. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that project. Veazey Park was purchased nearly 19 years ago, and happy to say that we still are using it. It's meeting many needs of the town as far as providing space for town groups to meet and to have their offices there. It's also useful for an inexpensive meeting place for events, and also really provides a little bit of history to Groveland. Since this is submitted under history, thinking about other historic buildings in Groveland, there really aren't too many. We have Washington Hall and the Little Red Schoolhouse, and Veazey Park. Most of the other public buildings in Groveland are less than 50 years old, so really aren't in the historic category. So I think we have made it a point through our funding of Washington Hall, Little Red Schoolhouse, and also some money that we put in previously at the Veazey Park, that we want to preserve our historic structures in buildings as much as possible. So the Veazey Park operates pretty much on its own as far as fee generation runs the park. So all of the fees that come out of renting the buildings there and some of the housing that's there all go right back into funding the park, and most of the money that's spent beyond the operating costs goes into repairing the buildings. Last year we spent over $15,000 of our operating money that was received for events on repairing one of the housing structures that's at the park. So those are the kind of things that we typically do to keep the place intact and going. The focus of this proposal is the main building at the park, and that building, parts of it date back to the early 1900s, somewhere between 1905 and 1910. And then the other portion of the building dates back to the early 60s, so they're nearly 60 years old, the other portion of the building. So it's a historic structure, and as I say, we have funded ongoing efforts throughout the last 19 years to maintain the building, to improve it, to keep it useful. One of the areas that we've had an ongoing problem with is in the Great Hall. The windows are they're Anderson-type windows, and they are, at least one of them is, you can't even close anymore, it's fallen out. Because of the poor maintenance that was previously done on the building, the windows have rotted, started to rot out, the frames have started to rot out, so they really, unfortunately, need to be completely replaced. The same thing goes for the door into that historic hall. These kind of things, they go on, you know, you kind of know that they're a problem, but then all of a sudden they reach a head. When I know that when I've got 2 calls over the past month that people can't close the door because it doesn't line up anymore and they can't lock it. So you got this big double door entrance to the building that's kind of sometimes left open or unlocked, leaking air in, and it's a bad security problem. So I know that it needs to be done. And then the final thing is, so we've got the windows on here, replacement, the door replacement on that portion of the building. And then on the other end of the building, the older portion of the building, we have a working fireplace that was restored by funds that we take in. And so we've been using that fireplace for at least 5 years, but we're a little concerned about the fires in there. Fires are desirable. People that rent the building for events like to use the fires, and so that usage of it is increased, but we're concerned a little bit about it. So the third item on here is a fireplace insert that would make it safer for the fireplace to be used potentially with a gas fireplace insert. So those are the 3 things that we're asking for under the historic portion, because I really firmly believe that the main building is the most historic structure there, and it's worthwhile of our efforts to keep it useful, keep it restored, keep it to be able to be open to the public, and also, as I say, it is a historic structure. So besides, you know, using it on a daily basis for many things, it's important to the history of our town. So we're asking for a request of $17,500. The total project cost is $19,500, but the our friends group, the Friends of Easy Park, is willing to donate $2,000 towards the total cost of the project. So the $17,500 is the CPA portion of the funding that would be required for that. Any questions?
Excellent.
Okay. Yes, yes.
I do just a point of order. If we can put this on for February 9th at the Board of Selectmen meeting, if we do approve this as a board, we'll have to do a conditional, just like.
No, you don't need to.
Isn't this town-owned property?
Yeah, but you don't need, because it's under conservation. It's under the care, control, and management.
Of
So you don't,
conservation.
yeah, so you don't have to worry
Okay.
about this.
All right, very good, thanks for correcting.
Sure.
I just had one question. It sounds like you have some money in the BCE fund, or the conservation fund, that you funded similar projects in the prior year, or am I misinterpreting this? You said you did $15,000 worth of
Yes.
work.
No. What we do is all of the money that comes into BC Park, that comes from rents and rentals, donations, and fundraising events, all of that goes into a revolving fund, and out of that money we pay for the operating costs of the park, our events manager, our caretaker, and then anything that we have left over, we do improvements on the property.
Gotcha.
Last year, we had to rehabilitate a house that's on the bottom of the property because the people moved out. We spent about $15,000 out of that revolving fund. Okay,
So we're reconvening next week at this time?
yes, yes,
Same
so,
this place, right?
yes, we will be here again at 7:30
On the 29th?
on the 29th. And as I say, hopefully, I've got on the agenda, minutes, that'll be moved to that day. We're also want to, let's see, here's the agenda. So, we want to finish, we've got 3 more project presentations to do. Then we look at the finance sheet again, just to make sure we've got all our ducks in a row on that. And then we'll debate on which of these projects, if any or all of them, we're going to fund and for how much money. And make our decisions so that we can submit our warrant articles. And we will conditionally vote on the housing one. And then as long as the selectmen approve that one, that can go on the warrant too. So that's our work for next week. So, I'll take a motion to close the meeting here at 9:20.
Make a motion, close the meeting.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, well done.